In the grand, glittering theater of 16th century European royalty, princesses were not people, they were pawns. They were beautiful, gilded chess pieces moved across the map to seal alliances, end wars, and secure dynasties. Their own desires, dreams, and even their lives were secondary to the needs of the state. But for one young girl, this political game would become a devastating personal tragedy. This is the story of Isabelle de Valois, a French princess who, at just 14 years old, was thrust into the heart of the most powerful and severe court in the world, forced to marry a king twice her age who was meant to be her father-in-law. She was known as Isabel of the Peace, a name earned by a marriage that ended a 60-year war, but for her, that peace came at the ultimate price. Hers is a story of duty, heartbreak, and a life cut tragically short in the relentless pursuit of a male heir. Stay with us as we uncover the heartbreaking story of the child queen who captivated a cold king's heart, only to be consumed by the very crown she was forced to wear. To understand Isabel's fate, you have to understand the world she was born into. The year was 1545. Europe was a bloody chessboard, and the two biggest players were the House of Valois in France and the Habsburgs, who controlled Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, and vast territories across the globe. For over 60 years, these two powers had been locked in a brutal series of conflicts known as the Italian Wars, draining treasuries and costing countless lives. Isabel was born into the very center of this conflict. Her father was King Henry II of France, a man obsessed with breaking Habsburg dominance. Her mother was the shrewd and politically savvy Catherine de Medici, a woman who understood better than anyone that a daughter in a royal house was a powerful diplomatic weapon. From the moment of her birth, Isabel's life was never truly her own. She was educated, taught languages, music, and the courtly graces, all to be molded into the perfect royal bride. She and her siblings, including the future Mary, Queen of Scots, who grew up alongside them, lived in a world of immense privilege, but it was a gilded cage. Every lesson, every public appearance, was an audition for her future role as a queen in a foreign land, a living seal on a peace treaty. The question wasn't if she would be married off for political gain, but when, and to whom. The answer came in 1559. After decades of relentless fighting, France and Spain were finally exhausted. They came to the negotiating table to sign the Peace of Cateau-Cambrésis, a landmark treaty that would redraw the map of Europe and end the Italian Wars. And like so many treaties of the era, this peace was to be sealed with royal blood, through marriage. The arrangement was set. 13-year-old Isabelle de Valois was to marry Don Carlos, the handsome but notoriously unstable heir to the Spanish throne. It was a perfect match on paper, uniting the next generation of French and Spanish rulers. But then, fate intervened in the cruelest way. King Philip II of Spain, Don Carlos's father, suddenly became a widower. His second wife, Queen Mary I of England Bloody Mary died, leaving him without a strong alliance. Philip, a deeply pragmatic and religious ruler, saw an opportunity. Why secure peace with the next generation when he could secure it himself, right now? In a shocking political pivot, the 32-year-old King Philip announced that he, not his son, would marry the young French princess. The treaty was hastily rewritten. In a blink of an eye, Isabel's fiancé became her stepson, and her future father-in-law became her husband. She was no longer destined to be the future Queen of Spain, she was to be its current queen, wife to the most powerful and feared monarch in Christendom. For a girl of just 14, it was a terrifying and bewildering turn of events. With the treaty signed, preparations for the grand wedding began in Paris. The French court erupted in celebration, with lavish feasts, balls, and tournaments. But a dark omen hung over the festivities. Isabelle was married by proxy in a glittering ceremony at Notre Dame Cathedral, with the Duke of Alba standing in for King Philip. It was meant to be the start of a new era of peace, a joyous occasion. The climax of the celebration was a grand jousting tournament. Isabelle's own father, King Henry II, a skilled and enthusiastic jouster, decided to participate. On the final day, against the advice of his concerned wife, Catherine de Medici, he rode against the young Count of Montgomery. In a horrifying freak accident, Montgomery's lance shattered. A large splinter flew up, pierced the king's visor, and impaled him through the eye and into his brain. For 10 agonizing days, the king lay dying, his court in shock and his daughter's wedding celebrations turning into a vigil of grief. He died on July 10, 1559. The wedding that was meant to celebrate peace had been inaugurated with the tragic death of Isabel's own father. It was a horrific start to her new life, forcing her to leave her grieving family and her home country under a cloud of sorrow to meet a husband she had never seen in a land she did not know. When Isabel finally arrived in Spain, the culture shock was immense. The French court she had left behind was known for its vibrancy, its love of arts, fashion, and lively conversation. The Spanish court, under the devout and austere King Philip II, was its polar opposite. It was a place of rigid etiquette, somber black clothing, and hushed, formal interactions. The air was thick with religious piety and suspicion. For a teenage girl accustomed to the warmth and relative freedom of the French court, it was like stepping into a beautiful, ornate tomb. She was isolated, surrounded by strangers who watched her every move. She didn't speak the language fluently at first, and her French entourage was quickly sent home to prevent any corrupting foreign influence. Philip himself was a daunting figure. He was known for his icy self-control, his immense workload, and his micromanagement of his vast empire. He was not a man given to open displays of affection. Isabel, now queen of this powerful nation, was utterly alone and a teenager forced to navigate a treacherous world of adult political intrigue, melting the icy king's heart. Despite the age gap, the grim circumstances, and the forbidding environment, the young queen proved to be remarkably resilient and charming. Isabel was not just a political pawn, she was intelligent, gentle, and possessed a quiet grace. Over time, her youthful spirit and genuine kindness began to thaw the famously cold King Philip. He was reportedly captivated by her beauty and her gentle nature. He began to spend more time with her, teaching her Spanish himself and showing a degree of affection that surprised the entire court. He called her his dearest love and jewel in letters, and he commissioned numerous portraits of her. For his part, Philip, who had known so much tragedy in his own life, losing his mother at a young age and outliving 2 wives, seemed to find a rare source of personal happiness with his young bride. Isabel, in turn, grew into her role. She learned the customs, mastered the language, and became a beloved figure at court. She transformed from a terrified child bride into a confident and respected queen, proving to be far more than just a name on a treaty. The dark shadow of Don Carlos. Lurking in the background of this developing relationship was the tragic figure of Don Carlos, the man Isabel was supposed to marry. Carlos was Philip's only son and heir, but he was mentally unstable and physically deformed, likely due to generations of Habsburg inbreeding. He was prone to violent outbursts, sadistic behavior, and erratic decisions. Despite this, Isabel treated her stepson with remarkable kindness and compassion. She was one of the few people at court who could soothe his volatile temper. This kindness, however, gave rise to dangerous court gossip. Whispers of a secret, forbidden love between the beautiful young queen and the tragic prince began to circulate. Romantic writers and playwrights would later seize upon this narrative, immortalizing it in works like Friedrich Schiller's famous play Don Carlos. While historians largely agree that a romantic relationship was highly improbable, the perception of one was damaging enough. As Carlos's behavior grew more erratic and he began plotting against his own father, Philip was forced to make a terrible decision. In 1568, he had his own son arrested and imprisoned. Don Carlos died in confinement 6 months later under mysterious circumstances, likely a result of his own self-destructive behavior in prison. For Isabel, the death of the young man who was once her fiancé must have been another profound tragedy in her short, difficult life. For any 16th century queen, there was one duty that overshadowed all others, producing a male heir. A kingdom's stability depended on a clear line of succession. Despite her success in winning the king's affection and navigating the court, Isabel's true worth in the eyes of the state rested in her ability to give Philip another son. The pressure was immense. She became pregnant for the first time in 1564, but tragically miscarried twin daughters. The loss was devastating both personally and politically. Finally, in 1566, she gave birth to a healthy baby girl, Infanta Isabella Clara Eugenia. A year later, she had another daughter, Catherine Michelle. While the king adored his daughters, the court was disappointed. The Spanish Empire needed a male heir, and the queen's health was beginning to suffer under the strain of repeated pregnancies. Each pregnancy was a gamble with her life in an age of primitive medicine, but it was a gamble the kingdom demanded she take. In 1568, just a few months after the death of Don Carlos, Queen Isabel found herself pregnant for a third time. This time, the court prayed it would be a son. But the pregnancy was difficult from the start. Isabel, now just 23 years old, was weak and frail. In October, she went into premature labor. After a grueling and agonizing delivery, she gave birth to another daughter, who lived for only a few hours. The ordeal was too much for the young queen's weakened body. Complications set in, and it soon became clear that she would not survive. King Philip II, the cold, stoic ruler of half the world, reportedly stayed by her bedside, holding her hand, and refused to leave until the very end. He was said to be utterly devastated by her death, falling into a deep depression. The girl who had been sent to him as a political pawn had become the love of his life, and he had lost her. Isabelle de Valois, Isabel of the Peace, died on October 3, 1568. She was only 23 years old. Her entire adult life had been spent in service of a crown that ultimately demanded her life in its quest for an heir. Isabelle de Valois lived for just 23 years. Her life was a brief, flickering candle in the dark, windswept corridors of European power. She was a pawn in a political game, a bride in a marriage of state, and a queen burdened by the impossible weight of dynastic duty. Yet, she was also more than that. She was a young woman who, against all odds, found a measure of happiness and love in the most unlikely of circumstances. She brought peace between two warring nations and, for a short time, brought warmth to the heart of a cold and lonely king. Her tragedy is a powerful reminder of the immense personal sacrifices that were often hidden behind the grand tapestries and stone walls of royal palaces, a reminder that every pawn on the historical chessboard was once a living, breathing person with their own hopes and fears. What do you think is the most tragic part of Isabel's story? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story as moving as we did, please hit that like button, subscribe for more tales from the hidden corners of history, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for watching.